Penn State gets back on the winning track, gains bowl eligibility under the White House lights in a dynamic fashion. And if you can't tell, my voice is maybe a little bit hoarse because I literally just got back from Beaver Stadium not too long ago. Once again, Tim Maiden, joined by Marty Leap here for a special After Dark edition of our post-game show. Marty, sir, how you doing?
Doing pretty good. I'm sure maybe not as good as you're doing because you were at the game tonight. I had planned on being there and had some family things popped up that prevented me from being there. But yeah, it's a heck of a night for Penn State. Really enjoyable and satisfying game for a lot of reasons that we'll get into. And as someone who is very worried about them going into this game and very worried about that rush defense, I will say that the crow that I am eating tonight tastes pretty dang good.
Yes, I should point you were one of the. I think you're maybe the only person in the Black Drives prediction roundtable who picked Minnesota to win, but that doesn't mean that a bunch of us weren't feeling shaky about our own projections for Penn State to win. I said 20-17 was my prediction, Penn State, but I kept telling people like, well, I'm glad they serve beer in Beaver Stadium because I'll probably need it. But turns out actually I didn't need it at all. Actually, I ended up having bottled water, mostly because I needed to hydrate. I had enough beers at my tailgates, but that's another story. But yeah, the whiteout atmosphere just absolutely electric. I know there was maybe some chatter at, oh well, because it's Minnesota and because Penn State's coming off you know just really rough loss to Michigan the last week. Maybe it just won't be the same. Nah, once you're there, once the lights, I mean, once it gets dark and you see that sea of white as you walk up for the tunnel up to your stands. I mean, it still takes your breath away. It doesn't matter if you're playing Minnesota, Auburn, Ohio State, Michigan. It's just amazing. So, and I think Marty, you've been to a few whiteout games, if I'm recalling correctly. So you know what I'm talking about. And yeah, for those of you watching right now, all two of you who've if you haven't, if you're just a college football fan, yeah, I would highly recommend if you ever get a chance to go check out a Penn State whiteout game. It's up there, and I'd say amongst the best college football experiences one can have. So, I guess transitioning to the game itself, both teams came into this reeling. We talk about Penn State; they were coming off just that absolutely brutal beatdown at the hands of Michigan last week, in which the defense, couldn't stop a cold from running over them, and the offense just really couldn't get anything going besides, Sean Clifford breaking off a big busted play for a run, and Harrison Wallace catching a deep ball. So there are question marks, but could Penn State, could they get the offense going again? Could Mike Yursich scheme something up? Meanwhile, Minnesota, they're coming in. Yeah, 4-2. They start out undefeated, 4-0. Then they drop last couple games, to Purdue, and then last week to Illinois. And during that Illinois game, that their starting quarterback Tanner Morgan suffered a serious injury. It turns out it was a concussion, but he had to go to the hospital for that. Thankfully, he was okay enough to travel back with the team. But that forced the Gophers to start Ethan Kaliakmanis, I believe that's how you say it. Who's also apparently he's nicknamed the Greek Rifle. Milwaukee Bucks have the Greek Freak, Giannis. Ethan Kaliakmanis is the Greek Rifle. Apparently he's got a good arm, but that didn't quite show up tonight, as we'll get into later on. But both teams come into this game really needing a win here, and in the beginning, at least that first quarter, it looked like, oh boy, here we go again. Penn State's hungover. They just, this doesn't seem like Yurcich has changed anything from the previous week. They're still trying to run up the gut. They're not really taking downfield shots. Receivers aren't getting separation. And on that insult to injury, Sean Clifford, who drew, I guess, a mix of boos and cheers when it was announced during the pregame starting lineups that he'd be a starting quarterback. He starts off on the wrong foot, throwing a deep ball that gets intercepted, and it damn near ended up being a pick six. But thankfully, it was the returner was stopped around the 15-yard line, and the Penn State defense, to their credit, they were able to hold Minnesota in check, keep them to a field goal, and from there on out, Sean Clifford only just went on to throw 4 touchdown passes, nearly 300 yards. Threw a and man, just threw a couple nice darts over the middle to tight ends, Theo Johnson, Tyler Warren. He had Parker Washington on one of those plays. And we can talk about it even more, but amazing pass, which looked like, it was maybe going to get picked, but Parker Washington wins that jump ball to catch it in the end zone. And then he finds a wide open Mitchell Tinsley later on for his 4th touchdown pass. So just all around great bounce back game for Sean Clifford. And speaking of eating crow, Marty, I know you being the biggest Sean Clifford hater on Black Shoe Diaries. Gotta admit, Sean had himself a hell of a bounce back game tonight.
Yeah, this was probably the best in my opinion, the best Sean Clifford's looked all year. Excuse me, maybe you can make the argument he played better against Ohio or maybe against Auburn, but I think Minnesota is a better team than both of those teams. So for Clifford, not just to play the way he did, but especially after the start, because like you said, Tim, those first couple drives, 3 and out, interception that's almost a pick six, and you're just like, oh boy, here we go. And I mean, from home, you could hear the boos on TV. It didn't look good. It didn't look good for Sean Clifford. And to his credit, he bounced back and put together an overall good game. 23 of 31, 295 yards, 4 touchdowns, and interception. Obviously, a lot more good than bad. So yeah, if Penn State can get the Sean Clifford they got tonight, the rest of the season, I think everyone's going to be very happy. And I think things will go pretty well for Penn State the rest of the year. But yeah, tip of the cap to Sean Clifford, because this was definitely a game where he could have very easily allowed things to unravel on him with the way he started. And to his credit, he didn't. He hung in there. He overcame the adversity, and he bounced back to put together an overall pretty good game at the quarterback position.
Absolutely. But also, to their credit, Nick Singleton, Katron Allen started out a little slow, but they both, as the game wore on, they churned out some good runs. Nick Singleton especially knocked out a pair of touchdown runs, but Katron Allen also ran pretty strong. There was one play I remember where Allen just lowers the shoulder which helped him pick up his extra couple yards and get a first down, and that drew some big cheers from the crowd. So talk about Sean Clifford got it going again. I think just as important, the run game made a nice return. Neither running back went over 100 yards, but combined they beat out Mo Ibrahim, who ran for 102 yards. And yes, congrats to him. Was a 15 straight game with 100 yards and a losing effort. But Marty, how important was it that the ground game also got going?
Yeah, I think it was vital in this one. You look at the running backs. Nick Singleton averaged 6.1 yards per carry. Katron Allen averaged 5.1 yards per carry. And it was important because when this offense was kind of stuck in neutral trying to get going, they didn't shy away from the running game. And that definitely helped open up some of the lanes for the tight ends. Early in the game, even though Penn State was struggling to run the ball, Minnesota was still respecting that running game. Minnesota was still putting 7-8 guys in the box, 7-8 guys on the line of scrimmage. And that definitely helped open up some of those lanes in the middle of the field for Theo Johnson, for Tyler Warren, for some of those big gainers they had. And then as Minnesota started to have to respect that passing attack more and started to back off the line, start to take some guys out of the box, kudos to Mike Yurcich for adjusting accordingly. They started to go to the run more and started to exploit it. I thought the offensive line played leaps and bounds better than they did last week. There were a lot of times in this game where they just opened up huge holes for Allen and Singleton, which helps, and especially Singleton. We saw tonight on more than one occasion, including that second touchdown of his, that just elite burst he has. He doesn't need a very big hole to hit it and go. The second touchdown he scored, it was not a huge hole on the offensive line, but it was enough to where with his speed, with his acceleration, he was able to just put a foot in the ground and go and waltz into the end zone. And yeah, it was a big night for the running backs, and it definitely played a huge role in Penn State, leaving the white out with a victory.
Oh, yeah, I fully agree on that. Also speaking of offensive weapons, we talked about it earlier, but the tight ends, Theo Johnson. Earlier this week, I remember he was one of the players interviewed and talked about how he felt he could contribute to this offense. Which up until this game, he had been rather quiet. Now, of course, he was out the first couple games of the season with an injury, and then I believe there's the Auburn game that he made his return in. But he'd been rather quiet. But until tonight, 5 catches, 75 yards, including a 25-yard touchdown catch, which helped put Penn State up 17-3. Um, just and then of course Tyler Warren had a nice touchdown grab himself, 38-yarder. That was the first touchdown of the game for Penn State. And I talked about this before we hit record, but it was as if Mike Yursich finally discovered, oh, I got tight ends who can catch. Maybe I should feed them the ball a bit more. And by God, it sure worked. But how great was it to see Theo, especially, have a night like this? I mean, it's, for all the talk about what a study was, he had been rather quiet coming to this game, and now here he is. And do you think this could become a trend? Maybe he becomes that main weapon in the offense going forward.
Yeah, you mentioned this becoming a trend moving forward. I think one thing that's important to mention is that for much of the season, Theo Johnson has been battling the injury bug. Probably the first game all year, he's been 100%. Definitely the first game all year, he looked 100%, which is important here. Yeah, if Theo Johnson can step up and become a big part of this passing attack, that goes a long way. Because, through the first 2 weeks of excuse me. For the first 2 weeks of the season, Brenton Strange has been arguably your best weapon in the passing game, but you need more than that. If Theo Johnson can step up, these receivers, which obviously we'll get into, I'm sure though, even before you get it, you'll agree with me. That's probably definitely the best game the receivers have played all year. If you can get them to sort of step up a bit more too, that helps a lot. But yeah, I think Theo Johnson could be a real X factor, a real wild card the rest of the way for Penn State, because he creates such a matchup nightmare for any defensive coordinator with his size, with his athleticism, with his speed. And, outside of Ohio State, Penn State is not going to play a team the rest of the year that is equal to them in talent. Quite honestly, and then this is no knock against Indiana, Maryland, Rutgers, and Michigan State, Penn State is going to be the far superior team talent-wise in every game the rest of the year outside of Ohio State. And those are the kind of games where a guy like Theo Johnson really can make a big difference and exploit some of those matchup nightmares. So, yeah, and moving forward, if you can get Theo Johnson to do just that for you, be a matchup nightmare, the matchup nightmare we anticipated coming into the season, that could be a huge shot in the arm for Penn State's offense.
Absolutely. And Tyler Warren, that was good to see him step up tonight too. And Brenton Strange, was not forgetting him. He only had one catch tonight for 5 yards, but he's always a potential option. So I hope tonight was kind of, Mike Yurcich probably realized, like, hey, I should do this a little more often. And this is something we see going forward because, well, frankly, if Ohio State coming in next week, it's all hands on deck. Everyone's got to bring their A game if they hope to, do the improbable and pull off the upsets. Moving on, let's talk about the defense. I mean, because for all the praise about the offense, defense, there were a lot of question marks the last week. I mean, 418 yards given up to Michigan, and Minnesota brings Mo Ibrahim, a quality runner in his own way, maybe not Blake Corum or Donovan Edwards caliber, but he's pretty darn good. And the question was, yeah, obviously there's had a first time start at quarterback, but if Mo Ibrahim could just pick up 6-7 yards per carry on average, maybe it wouldn't matter much. But Penn State defense, to their credit, they held Ibrahim to an average about 3.5 yards per carry. As I said before, he did go over 100 yards, but took him 30 carries in order to do so. And the next best rusher was quarterback Athan, who he ran 7 times for 45 yards. But of course, his problem with Athan, of course, the passing numbers, not the best. 9 of 22, 175 yards, a touchdown, and then just kind of a back-breaking interception in the second half, which Jair Brown, which I don't know if you like it. Just I was there in a stadium and I saw the pass go off, going right into the arms of Jair Brown. I don't see a single Minnesota receiver in sight. I'm just wondering, like, what the heck was Athan seeing when he threw that pass? But fine with me. But that interception, you can probably I would, when I do my turning point post for Monday, I would probably make that the turning point of the game, because it was a 2-touchdown game, and yeah, against a team like Minnesota, especially one that was missing a few key players, that might have been enough, but to get that interception, which then ultimately led to another Penn State touchdown, which put them up 31-10. By that point, you're feeling pretty good, because we can get this even more. But when you're facing a team that's coached on offense by Kirk Shiraka, it's not the kind of team that you expect quick strike scoring from. So it's kind of like playing a service academy team almost. Like, if you can get up on them by a few touchdowns and make them have to just take them out of their elements, it really makes a huge difference.
Yeah, even on the broadcast tonight, Greg McElroy and Joe Testorch, obviously something you wouldn't have heard me at the game, but they were talking about Minnesota's offense, and they were talking about Minnesota. They're not always looking for the home run. They're content hitting single after single after single and kind of grinding you into the ground, and that's what we saw, and I think that's a big reason why. I was watching it with my dad and with some other family members, and that's what we were talking. So, man, if they can, you get this thing to about 14 to 17 points, and Minnesota's in a lot of trouble. And that's why, because the way the offense is built. So, tip of the cap to Penn State for that, for getting themselves in the position to get to that lead. And just, for lack of a better term, I don't want to say they sat on it, because they didn't sit on it, because they never once. And this is one thing I was glad to see too, because we've seen a lot of the opposite of James Franklin over the years. They never once played not to lose tonight. Even when the lead started to grow offensively, they kept the foot on the gas. They continued to try and score. They continue to play to win. They never once played not to lose, which can go a long way in football. But yeah, to circle back to Minnesota's offense, as you said, it's an offense that it's not going to be built around around the big play. As I said on TV, single after single after single, and Penn State didn't allow that to happen tonight. And yeah, it was they were able to pull it off, and just huge bounce back performance by Manny Diaz and his crew.
Now, there was a moment, and I don't know, it seems like they have this issue where it's late in the half. Penn State's trying to burn time out so they can get the ball back one last time. And then it comes back to bite them, because the other team converts a 3rd and long on some improbable pass play and moves the chains. And in this case, it's like 3rd and 8. And Minnesota's like backed up, like probably around the 10-yard line. And, Athan, it was great. He just throws like this incredible shot down to the left sideline. And Johnny Dixon could not have covered it any better, but the Minnesota receiver just came down with it. And, that was a spark they needed. And they ended up having a 9-play, 90-yard touchdown drive right before the half. And suddenly, the momentum is shifted in Minnesota's favor going into the locker room. and because they got the ball to start second half, but to their credit, the defense stepped up, forced Minnesota to punt. It was one of 7 punts Penn State forced that night. Penn State gets the ball, first possession, second half. They marched downfield for a touchdown, and they would actually go on to do that for their next 3 drives after that. And they only it's funny they only punted once in the second half, and that was in garbage time. That's after punting 3 times in the first half. But that was something that wasn't surprising to me. I mean, the offense just responded and kept clicking, and just you kept wondering if they were gonna get slowed down or Minnesota was gonna figure them out. But man, they just stepped on the accelerator and did not let up, and that was a really refreshing thing to see.
Yeah, you mentioned the offense, and to me, I think what was most surprising was if you watch the offense early in the game, I think a lot of people, myself included, were thinking like, "Oh no, here we go again with the offense just struggling and being a hot mess." But no, to their credit, like you said, they accelerated, they put their foot on the gas, never let down, and once they were able to finally get into a rhythm in the second quarter, they never looked back. The final score was 45-17. In all honesty, the game wasn't even that close. And a big reason it really wasn't that close because Penn State's offense. This definitely felt like a game where if Penn State wanted or needed to score another 7, 10, 14 points, they definitely could have done it.
Oh, certainly. But it was good in the sense that this is obviously not this is a Minnesota team that's not at full strength. There's no healthy Tanner Morgan. Chris Altman-Bell, their star receiver, was injured for the remainder of the year a few games ago. So they were down a couple key guys, and surely this would have been a more competitive game if they were fully healthy. But a good team, I guess a truly good team, should come out and wax or at least win handily enough over a team like Minnesota that's not quite at full strength. So that was really nice to see it, and it definitely, I don't know about you, Mario, but it definitely gave me more confidence going forward. Obviously, got Ohio State next week. I'm I would definitely project a loss. Of course, I will never say never after what happened in 2016, but likely loss. But after that, you got a very doable November slate. You're at Indiana, who's, let's just face they're a bad team. Of course, they'll be annoying as hell in Bloomington as usual, but I'm not, for some reason, I'm not as worried about that as I usually am for trips to Bloomington. They got Maryland at home following week, which probably be their stiffest test in November. They, especially if Talia Tungavailoa is healthy again, keep an eye on that. And then following, they're at Rutgers, who look, that the talent, the spirit between the two teams is just so much that Penn State could probably sleepwalk to a 2-touchdown win there. Actually, I've seen them do it in the past, frankly. So then you got Michigan State at home to finish the year, and Michigan State, yeah, they beat Wisconsin last week, but I don't know. Wisconsin's not that good either, it seems. So, I mean, I still would be inclined to think Penn State should beat them handily enough. So, big chance here to go 10-2, which obviously, for a multitude of reasons, would be a great thing. Obviously, it helps wash out the bitter taste of the last 2 seasons. It's good for recruiting. It's good for keeping the players in the team happy. Just get all around good vibes if you can finish this season with double digits in wins.
Yeah, absolutely. Coming into the year, I think any Penn State fan would have had to been over the moon about the potential of going 10-2. And to me, it's funny because you look at the Ohio State game next week, and you circle back to 2016, when Penn State went to Minnesota or went to Michigan, gets absolutely blasted. The following week comes home, plays Minnesota and beats them. And coming out of the Minnesota game, a lot of the sentiment was, hey, you know what? They're going to lose to Ohio State, but they probably could win out outside of that. That'd be a really good season. And here we are. Get blown out in the big house. You come home, you beat beat Minnesota. And here we are saying, man, they're going to lose to Ohio State, but could still be a really good season. So it's just kind of ironic to me that that's where we're at. I will say, too, before we go further, tip of the cap to James Franklin's staff tonight. One thing I've been very critical of him and a lot of people have, is the back-to-back losses. And
Yes,
this is his 9th year at Penn State. In the first 8, he's lost back-to-back games in 6 of his 8 seasons. And that could have happened tonight, and it didn't. So yeah, kudos to them for bouncing back and not losing tonight. Again, I still think they're going to lose to Ohio State. I still be very surprised they beat Ohio State. But like you said, there's no reason this team can't go 10-2. And a 10-2 Penn State, with the national brand they are, with the attention they grab, that team's going to a New Year's Six Bowl every time. So if Penn State can get the 10 wins, you're looking at a Cotton Bowl, you're looking at Orange Bowl, something like that. But
I've seen Orange Bowl projections mostly.
yeah, and give me that. Give me the Orange Bowl against an ACC team. It'd be a good matchup. But yeah, it's obviously you got to come out and take care of business. But even assuming they lose to Ohio State next week, there's no reason this team can't get the 10 wins. They're just simply going to be much more talented than each of the team left on their schedule, especially if Talia Tagovailoa does not play for Maryland. I mean, Maryland did not have him today, and they were very lucky to beat Northwestern. So that is a player that makes a world of difference for the Terps. But yeah, just it's going to be a big test next week against Ohio State. That is a game where I don't think Penn State wins, but I think they're going to do what they do against Ohio State, keep it close, keep it competitive, probably lure us in a couple times of thinking that they can't pull it off. But if nothing else, I think it'll be a hell of a lot more closely contested in their game in Michigan was last week.
Yeah, well, we only talk about how Maryland or Pitt treats Penn State as a Super Bowl, and Penn State treats Ohio State as their Super Bowl. I mean, they always give them a fight, and I would take that to the bank that they keep it competitive for 3 quarters. Now I'd say I think Ohio State's got just a little too much offensive firepower and probably will come up with a couple huge plays in fourth quarter to put it away. But of course, like I said before, 2016 taught me to never say never. So I won't say Penn State has zero chance, slim chance. But if they can, keep it in striking distance going to the fourth quarter, it's all I can really ask for. Speaking of Ohio State, they absolutely waxed Iowa today. What now? Granted, it wasn't. It was close for about quarter and a half. Iowa's defense, to their credit, very bend but don't break. Kind of mirrored like Penn State's game against Michigan last week. First half, they were holding Ohio State to field goal after field goal after field goal. I mean, it's a game that probably should have been like 35-10 at the half, or at least 35-10, maybe like 42-10, but it's 26-10 though at halftime. And then second half, Ohio State, this C.J. Stroud just got it going. Really, he hits Julian Fleming, Emeka Buka, Marvin Harrison, all for touchdowns. Looks like Jackson Smith, the Jigba, got hurt again after.
Yeah, he re-aggravated his hamstring pretty early in the game, did not return. So that's definitely a storyline to watch this week if you're Penn State, because I mean, obviously Ohio State is extremely deep and talented wide receiver with or without Jackson Smith and Jigba, but Jackson Smith and Jigba might be the best all-around player in college football. So definitely a storyline to watch this week.
Absolutely, and well, this will be the kind of game though that the no-fly zone, the secondaries, gets up for. I mean, this is gonna be your biggest test. Like I said, we mentioned, Fleming, Buka, Harrison, all studs who are capable of making the big play. So yeah, I'm curious to see how Kalen King, Joey Porter Jr., Jair Brown, Johnny Dixon, all those guys, how they how good of a job they do in one-on-one matchups against Ohio State Stelly receivers. If they can, if they can put the kinds of performance they've been putting up all season long, I think we'll definitely have ourselves a ball game. Uh, and if they can, of course, you also got to worry about their round game. Trevion Henderson, Mayan Williams, the Lightning and Thunder. Now, Iowa did a good job actually holding those two in check. Henderson only had 38 yards and 11 carries. Williams only had 19 yards and 10 carries, though he did have a touchdown. But it's like I said, this will be the biggest test yet for the Penn State defense. And this is it's a game where if they can hold Ohio State's offense relatively in check, enough to keep the team within, like, give them that puncher's chance where, if you get some kind of, maybe not like a block six, but you have a chance where if you can come up with some big play and suddenly tie or take the lead in the fourth quarter, like that's it's about all you can ask for.
Yeah, if you can be in a position like you said, just hang around, hang around. How many times do we see in football where the upset happens because the underdog just keeps hanging around, hanging around, hanging around. The favorite can't put them away. I think that's key for Penn State next week. Don't fall behind by more than 7 to 10 points at any point. Um, I think last year's game against Ohio State is a good blueprint of that. They never really got completely out of it with a score, and if it would have been for that Sean Clifford fumble that was returned for a touchdown right before halftime, could have been a much different game. But yeah, and the thing is that they always play Ohio State tough. And you mentioned the secondary; they're recruited with beating Ohio State in mind. It should be a lot of fun, honestly, next weekend to watch. Joey Porter Jr. and Kalen King and Tick Brown and Johnny Dixon go up against and Buka go up against Marvin Harrison Jr., Julian Fleming, Jack Smith and Jigba if he plays. It's going to be, probably the best wide receiver core in the country going up against the top 5 secondary in the country. That is going to be a really, really fun matchup to watch. And, whichever position group wins that battle very well may decide who wins the game on Saturday.
And that's also going to be that's also be a lot of fanfare behind that, not just for the game itself, but Fox's big noon kickoff show will be live there for the first time ever. Obviously, they've hosted College Game Day, like the last 5 years in a row. Probably not going to happen this year, but they do get Big Noon kick for the first time, and of course, it'll also be the first time Big Noon's calling a game in Happy Valley. So you have Gus Johnson. I guess we're going to do a fun drinking game. Take a drink every time he goes, the Cincinnati Kid, to describe Sean Clifford. And yeah, so
that's a ballsy move. I contemplated doing that in the Michigan game, and I'm glad I didn't, because by halftime I would have been 6 drinks deep and flopping around the floor, unable to watch the game. But yeah, no, it'll be.
I mean, not have been a bad thing.
I'm all for it. And you know what? Yeah, against Michigan, that would not have been a bad thing at all. But yeah, I'm all for anything with Gus Johnson involved, because Gus is my guy. I love Gus Johnson, so I'm all for it next week. I think Gus Johnson and Joel Klatt are at worst, probably the second best announced team in college football behind Herbie and Fowler.
Yeah, I think people are very polar. It kind of like with Brent Musburger. People either love or hate Gus Johnson. Like, there's hardly any in between. Personally, I enjoy him. I mean, going back to March Madness, like, he used to call March Madness games for CBS, and just see him get excited as, like, 13 seeds knocking out the 4 in the first round, or someone just hits some crazy go-ahead shot in the final seconds. So I've been a fan of his going back a long time. So it'll be good to have him on the call next week. And it's also the stripe out game. So normally this would have been the whiteout opponent, but of course whiteouts don't look nearly as good in the daylight as they do at night. I'm glad they made the decision, back in the summer to make Minnesota the whiteout game because it was amazing. It was still amazing. Just it was lovely tailgating weather. I hit up a couple tailgates during the day, so enjoyed some amazing food. It was just great to be back. Especially just to be back at a game and be at a game where Penn State won because last year was at the Michigan game, which did not go as well. And I'm hoping I don't know I might get back potentially Thanksgiving weekend for the Michigan State game, and hopefully at that point Penn State will be trying to get that 10th win on the year. So, Marty, do you have any plans to be at any of the games this season?
I'm hoping for the Maryland game here in a couple of weeks. Checking in for that one. Michigan State's also one I have circled to potentially get to, but yeah, it's definitely, and I know you can test this as well. If you're just a college football fan in general, whiteout or not, Beaver Stadium, Happy Valley, it's got to be a bucket list kind of thing for you because it doesn't get much better than even if it's not a whiteout, you're gonna have 100,000 plus in there, and it's a special atmosphere and it's a lot of fun.
Absolutely. More than I cannot recommend it enough. Um, so unfortunately, not much engagement tonight in really no engagement in the comments section. In fairness, it is almost 1 in the morning here on the East Coast, so maybe some of y'all just had enough and went to bed. Um, but it was thank you for tuning in. Just a couple housekeeping items. If you haven't already, if you enjoy what you watch, please hit like and subscribe on our Penn State Voice of College Football channel. Just trying to grow the channel, get more subscribers. When I checked last week, we had 541 subscribers. I hadn't checked tonight, but I was hoping we could hit 550 by the end of the month. We still got 8 more days here in October, so let's see if we can hit that. Also, more importantly, BlackShoeDiaries.com. That's where Marty and I help cover Penn State football, along with numerous other fine writers on the site. Well, Marty, you're taking my position grades post since I'm going to be driving back from State College tomorrow morning. But you'll also have your Twitter reaction post, and I'll have the turning point up on Monday, and also the winter sports seasons are coming up. Basketball, we'll start to ramp up basketball coverage. There's only a couple of weeks until the team tips off the season against Winthrop. Hockey's in full swing right now. Wrestling's about to get started, and going towards yet another national championship. So we all got writers who cover all those sports. So we're more than just football, folks. If you want your Penn State sports fix, BlackShoeDiaries.com is the place to go. Marty, you have anything to add before we call it a night?
No, I do not. Like you said, just continue sticking with BlackShoeDiaries.com, not just through the end of football season, but into the winter sports, especially if you are crazy enough to enjoy Tim and I and what we do, because we're definitely gonna be two of your biggest guys for basketball season when it rolls around, and should be a fun basketball season in Happy Valley. Not to go off on a basketball tangent, but year one under Micah Shrewsbury was definitely a fun, successful season for Penn State. Brought in a really good recruiting class. Wouldn't be a shocker to see the Nittany Lions floating around for a potential NCAA berth come March. So, this could be one of the more fun seasons we've had in Happy Valley in quite a while for basketball. But I know I've mentioned the show before if you're a longtime listener, but I feel like very few sites cover Penn State hockey with the depth and just overall good coverage that we have Black Shoe Diary. So make sure to check it out and follow along. It's all year long. We've got you covered regardless of the sports season for Penn State. So just make sure to check out Black Shoe Diaries because it doesn't matter if it's football, basketball, hockey, wrestling, whatever it is, we've got you covered.
Absolutely. Well, thanks again, everyone, for tuning in, and we will see you next week after the Ohio State game.